How are your relationships today? Personal, professional. Could they be better? Welcome to Talk Time with Trish, with host Trish Forante and co-host Lisa Stewart. There are so many variables that affect our lives. What makes the difference in our lives is genuine communication. Now, here are your hosts, Trish Forante and Lisa Stewart.
Hi, this is Trish Forante, and welcome to Talk Time with Trish. Our show is about improving communication for both men and women. Today we're going to talk about workplace war zones, staying out of the line of fire. And my guest today is the one and only Dr. Lisa Stewart, my co-host. Dr. Stewart is the Clinical Director of Managed Care Concepts Employee Assistance Program, Executive Director of Creative Consultants, a clinical mental health professional, a psychotherapist in private practice, a wife and mother. Considered to be a communication expert, Dr. Stewart says, wearing all these different hats, I have to be. Welcome, Dr. Stewart.
Thank you. That was quite an intro, Trish. It's nice to be here again. And one of my favorite topics, obviously, communication and communication in the workplace, which is something that is really, I think, all close to our hearts in terms of just being appropriate in the workplace and surviving the workplace sometimes.
Well, that's true, and we know that all too well. EAP, Employee Assistance Program, for our listeners, tell us, what is that? Define that for us in a way that our listeners can understand.
Employee assistance programs are typically benefits that are purchased by an employer for their employees. And a good solid EAP is going to do lots of things for their client companies. They typically provide counseling for the employees, and then there are also lots of services they provide to the companies, including, debriefing, which just means coming in and providing counseling if there's difficult situations that come up that the employees need to be attended to. We provide consultation and training. We work with the executive team to help implement programs and help resolve workplace problems. So there are lots of things that a good, solid employee assistance program would do for their clients.
Okay. But let's talk about employees and the employee assistance program. Give me an idea of what you're talking about when you say workplace war zones. What are you referring to?
Well, and I just going back to needing to feel okay and comfortable and taken care of and valued and respected at work. When your workplace is uncomfortable, when there's conflict, and when I talk about war zones, I refer to interpersonal conflicts, and those can be between coworkers, they can be between management and frontline employees. It's any kind of situation that tends to escalate or feel uncomfortable or feel unsafe for whatever reason. So, there are the interpersonal issues. That's primarily what I'm referring to, but we also have, certain workplace settings can actually be dangerous. So that's another thing that EAPs are often involved in.
Dangerous workplace settings. We don't want to really move in that direction because unfortunately, in 2012, on a national level, there were a number of workplace war zones that
were literal war zones.
Yes, that we could dissect and take apart. But let's define for our listeners interpersonal conflicts. Let's sort of break that down, because there are a number of different ways we can look at that. So I'm going to toss that over to you to define for us.
Well, and I can give you some examples. A lot of employees may call their EAP, the Employee Assistance Program, because of conflicts with their boss, for example. Let's say they have a boss that is, they feel is belligerent or mean or setting them up to get fired, or just, for whatever reason, they're not feeling supported. And what ends up happening is on the employee end, resentment builds up. Anger builds up. They end up, feeling unhappy just coming to work in the morning. And I've talked to a lot of employees who say that tears come into their eyes as the closer they get to the building where they work, the more they just feel like breaking down and crying. In the mental health field or in the healthcare field, we would call that burnout. But typically it's related to the lack of support or a lack of good interpersonal communication. And, and again, it comes from the top down. So if they're not feeling supported by their employer, it makes it hard to feel good in every other situation. So there's the aggressive boss or even other coworkers who tend to be bullies. We talk about bullying in the school system all the time. Bullying happens in the workplace as well. And that's very dangerous. It's very dangerous because, explosions can happen and the potential for workplace violence is greater when there's bullying that goes on.
Oh, excellent points. And let's talk for a second about the employer-employee interpersonal conflicts, because that's a big one. I hear about that all the time. And so what do you recommend that an employee do if he or she is having a problem with the direct report, with the person, the supervisor or the manager that the employee reports to? What do you recommend?
Well, the supervisor might say, they're always right. And an employee just say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, you're always right. And that might solve quite a few of the problems or the issues that come up. However, if you're going to be a really productive, efficient, effective member of a workplace team, the communication has to go back and forth. And I will coach employees frequently on how to have those conversations with their boss. And in some ways, understanding where the supervisor, where the boss or manager is coming from goes a long way towards resolving some of these issues. Because as an employee, I feel like it's my job to meet my boss's expectations. And that's what I coach employees on. Ask the question. Often employees will tell me, if I ask them, well, what kind of feedback have you gotten? Do you know how you're doing? And the employees will respond with, I have no idea and I don't want to know. I don't want to ask because I'm afraid it's going to be bad. Mm-hmm. And I encourage them to ask.
Well, it's funny that you say that because that goes back to the whole theme of the show, Talk Time with Trish, is effective communication from the get-go. Yeah. So encourage the employee to talk directly to the supervisor or manager that he or she reports to. So what would that sound like? Let's role play. Let's have some fun here. And okay, what does that sound like?
Well, one example might be, as an employee, if I'm noticing that my supervisor is unhappy, upset, brings up something, for example, that happened 2 weeks ago that I thought had been resolved, as an employee, what I might say is, I noticed that you mentioned X, Y, and Z, and it was my understanding that was fixed, that we had resolved that issue, but tell me more about what your concerns are. It seems like you're still upset about that, or that's still a problem that we need to address. So to just hit it head on, to acknowledge the feelings, acknowledge what you're seeing and hearing, which is factual. I'm noticing you're upset. I'm noticing you may still have concerns about this issue. How can we fix this? What do I need to do to help resolve this problem?
That's great. And what I'm going to do is give you an example of exactly that I have had the privilege, and I say that word with intent, of working with an employee out on the West Coast that had that exact experience that you described and how that employee dealt with it. It was exactly what you said. 2 weeks later, after the employee thought a situation had been dealt with, the employer went back to the employee and started saying, this is a problem. We have a problem here. XYZ is a problem. And the employee was stunned, having absolutely no idea that this issue was still on the radar screen. And that employee, what happened was there was a silence and a gathering of thoughts, a going back to the office, collecting thoughts, and then almost immediately, the next day or day after, went back to the employer and almost verbatim talked the way that you're suggesting and said, look, I had no idea this was still bothering you. Can we talk about this? Because I need to fix this. My end of this, I need to fix.
Trish, you must have coached this employee on how to say that. I'm convinced of that.
Well, I did. But this particular individual really had the gumption to want to fix things, just really wanted to fix things because it was a place that the intent was to remain there for a while. It was a new director in the position, which is a whole different ball of wax. You know, we add that to the mix. And happy ending. The happy ending is 6 months later, the employee is still there, the employer is still there, and while they're not really crazy about each other as people off the clock, while they're at work, they do very, very, very well. And the employer got his needs met, and the employee got needs met there as well. And it's time to take a short break. This is Trish Forante with my guest today, Dr. Lisa Stewart. You're listening to Talk Time with Trish on the Voice America Health and Wellness channel. Stay tuned, please.
Better communication means better relationships in every sense of the word. When you communicate more effectively and interact more effectively, your life is lived more effectively. Tune in to Talk Time with Trish, featuring host Trish Forante and co-host Lisa Stewart. Our program is all about the human element. We are all comprised of parts and stuff that we may be aware of or others may be aware of. When we become aware of what others are aware of, it means more to us. Tune in every Friday at noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific on Voice America Health and Wellness.